The sun hammered down on the devil's anvil, baking the red clay of the earth until it cracked like an old saucer. It was the year 1875, and the heat in the Arizona Territory did not care if a man was a saint or a sinner. It burned them all the same. High on a limestone ridge overlooking the sprawling, dusty grid of gray mesa, Coda Blackhawk sat atop his paint horse. He was still as the stone itself. His brown eyes narrowed against the glare. To a casual observer, he looked like a relic of a dying age. He wore the buckskins of his people, dyed with walnut shells and softened by years of sweat and friction. But across his saddle lay a Winchester repeating rifle, the cold steel mechanism of the New World. Below him, moving like beetles across the scrubland, a team of surveyors drove wooden stakes into the ground. Coda watched them with a heavy knot in his stomach. They were measuring the earth for the iron road. The railroad men called it progress. Coda knew it as a throat that would never stop swallowing. Every stake they drove into the soil was a nail in the coffin of the sacred valley. The lush, hidden canyon north of here, where the springs still ran clear, and his people had buried their dead for 10 generations. They moved fast, Coda murmured in his own tongue. The words lost to the wind. His horse shifted, restless. Coda patted the animal's neck. He was a man torn in half, to the army at Fort Defiance. He was a scout, a useful asset who knew the water holes and the dialects of the Apache and the Navajo. To his younger brother Chayton, he was a traitor who licked the boots of the men who stole their land. But Chayton saw only blood. Coda saw the numbers. He saw the endless stream of wagons coming from the east. War would only bring a quick death. Coda was trying to buy them a slow survival, hoping that if he made himself indispensable to the soldiers, he could steer them away from the sacred valley. It was a gamble, and every day the odds grew worse. He watched one of the surveyors check a compass and point directly north, toward the canyon entrance. Coda turned his horse away. He had to go into town. He had to hear what the white men were whispering when they thought the wilderness was not listening. The town of Gray Mesa was a collection of timber and adobe clinging to the edge of civilization. It smelled of sawdust, horse manure, and the copper tang of dried blood from the slaughterhouse. Lily Hart stood on the porch of her father's clinic, wiping her hands on a rag that was already stained with iodine. She was 26 years old, an age by which most women in the territory were already worn down by 3 children and a hard life of scrubbing laundry. Lily, however, was still Miss Hart. You are going to scare off the suitors. Lily, her father, Dr. Jonathan Hart, had told her that morning as she stitched up the hand of a drunken miner. A man likes a woman who faints at the sight of blood, not one who critiques his suturing technique. Then I suppose I shall have to marry a butcher. Father, she had replied, not looking up from her needlework. Or perhaps a surgeon. She tossed the rag into a bucket. Lily was not beautiful in the porcelain doll fashion that the magazines from Boston praised. She was too tall, her shoulders too broad from lifting crates of medicine, and her skin was dusted with freckles from refusing to wear a bonnet properly. She loved the harsh beauty of this land. She loved to ride her mare out to the painted cliffs and sketch the hawks circling the thermals. She felt stifled by the tea parties and the hushed gossip of the church ladies who whispered that a doctor's daughter should not be handling the bodies of rough men. A shadow fell across the porch steps. "Miss Hart," a smooth voice called out. "You look positively radiant, even amidst the grim business of medicine." Lily suppressed a sigh before turning. Major Silas Carrington stood there, one hand resting on the hilt of his cavalry saber, the other holding his pristine hat against his chest. He was a handsome man, with a jawline that could cut glass and a uniform that was always impeccably pressed, regardless of the dust. "Major," Lily said, offering a polite nod. "To what do we owe the pleasure? Did you cut yourself shaving again?" Silas chuckled, a dry sound that did not quite reach his pale blue eyes. "Sharp as ever. No, I came to check on your father, and, I admit, to see if you might allow me to escort you to the church social this evening. The railroad investors are in town. It will be quite the affair." "Railroad investors?" Lily repeated, her tone cooling. Is that why the soldiers are so busy lately guarding men with rulers? Silas stepped closer, his smile tightening just a fraction. The railroad brings civilization, Lily, supplies, medicine, safety. It is the future. And men like me are here to ensure that the future is orderly. Orderly? Lily mused. She looked past him, toward the hazy purple line of the mountains. It feels more like an invasion. Major, the people who live out there, they have their own order. Savagery is not order, my dear. Silas put his hat back on, adjusting the brim. But let us not talk about politics. Say you will come. Your father believes it would be good for you to be seen in proper company. Lily felt the trap closing. Her father liked Silas. He saw a stable officer with a pension and political ambitions. He did not see the way Silas looked at the world as something to be conquered, divided, and sold. I will consider it, Major, she said. But right now, I need to go to the market. We are out of laudanum and bandages. Allow me to walk you, Silas offered instantly. I am quite capable of walking across the street. Major, please, go inside. Father has some brandy he has been dying to share with you. She stepped off the porch before he could insist, moving quickly into the bustling flow of the main street. She needed air. She needed to not be looked at like a prize mare at an auction. The market was a chaotic swirl of noise. Miners in rough denim haggled over pickaxes, while farmers' wives inspected crates of wilting vegetables brought in by wagon. Chickens squawked in bamboo cages, and a piano player in the gem saloon was hammering out a tune that sounded like a bag of cats hitting a wall. Coda moved through the crowd like a ghost. He had tied his horse at the far end of the street and walked with 2 other men from his tribe. They were here to trade buckskins for flour and salt. He kept his head down, ignoring the stares. He could feel the eyes of the townspeople crawling over him. Savage, redskin, beggar. He heard the words muttered under the breath of a woman sweeping her stoop. He did not react. To react was to give them power. He handed a stack of cured hides to the merchant at the general store. The man, a balding fellow named Mr. O'Malley, took them with a sneer but counted out the coin. $5, O'Malley said. 7, Coda said, his English crisp and clear. The winter coats are thick. They are worth 7. O'Malley blinked, surprised as always that the Indian spoke better than half the drunks in town. 6, and take your friends out the back way. Coda took the $6 silver coins that felt heavy and cold and nodded to his companions. They moved back out into the sun. That was when the world exploded into noise. At the far end of the street, a miner's burro, laden with cooking pans, spooked at a stray dog. The burro kicked out, striking the lead horse of a heavy freight wagon loaded with timber. The horse, a massive roan, screamed and reared, snapping its harness leather. Panic flashed through the team. The driver shouted, losing his grip on the reins as the wagon lurched violently to the left. "Look out!" someone screamed. The wagon, now a runaway juggernaut of wood and iron, thundered down the main thoroughfare. The crowd scattered like quail. Men dove behind water troughs. Women grabbed their children and ran for the boardwalks. Lily had been crossing the street, her mind drifting, looking at a bolt of blue fabric in a window. She heard the shout and turned. She saw the wall of horseflesh and timber barreling toward her. She froze. It was a primal, human reaction. Her boots seemed nailed to the dirt. The led horse was frothing at the mouth, its eyes rolling wild, the heavy wooden wheels of the wagon grinding up the dust just 20 feet away. There was no time to run. She raised her hands as if to ward off the blow. Coda did not think. He did not calculate the politics or the consequences. He only saw life about to be crushed. He was standing 10 yards away, next to his own horse, which he had just untied. In one fluid motion that defied the eye, he vaulted onto the animal's bare back. He did not have time to grab the reins. He gripped the mane, kicked the horse's flanks, and screamed a command in his native tongue. The paint horse launched forward, a streak of black and white muscle cutting across the path of the wagon. It was a suicide angle. Coda leaned precariously off the side of his mount, Extending his right arm to its limit, the ground rushed by in a blur of brown and gray. "Give me your hand," he roared in English. Lily saw him, then a flash of buckskin and intense dark eyes flying toward her amidst the chaos. She reached out blindly. Coda's hand clamped around her waist. The impact nearly pulled him out of the saddle. He gritted his teeth, the muscles in his back screaming as he leveraged his weight against the horse's momentum. With a heave that summoned every ounce of his strength, he swung her up. Lily's feet left the ground a split second before the freight wagon smashed into the spot where she had been standing, splintering a water barrel into 1,000 wet fragments. Coda hauled her onto the withers of his horse, wrapping his arm tightly around her to keep her from falling as he wrestled his mount to a halt. The horse danced sideways, snorting, agitated by the noise of the crashing wagon behind them. For a long moment, there was silence. The piano in the saloon had stopped. The shouting had ceased. The only sound was the heavy breathing of the horses and the settling dust. Lily was pressed against Coda's chest. She could feel the hard thump of his heart against her ear. She smelled sagebrush, wood smoke, and the clean scent of leather. She looked up, her bonnet knocked askew, her face pale. She was staring directly into the face of the warrior. His hair was long and black, tied back with a leather thong. His face was sharp angles and copper skin, but his eyes were not the eyes of a savage. They were intelligent, deep, and currently filled with concern. "Are you hurt?" Coda asked. His voice was low, vibrating through his chest. Lily blinked, realizing she was clinging to his shirt. No, I am not hurt." She realized then that they were the center of the universe. Every eye in Gray Mesa was fixed on them. The white doctor's daughter, wrapped in the arms of a native scout, high atop a horse in the middle of Main Street. Coda felt the shift in the air. He felt the tension rising from the boardwalks like heat shimmer. He loosened his grip immediately, though he kept a hand on her arm to steady her as he slid from the horse. He reached up and helped her down. His hands were rough, calloused, but gentle. As soon as her boots touched the dust, he stepped back, creating a deliberate distance between them. "You should be more careful," Coda said, his face closing up, becoming the stone mask again. "Death moves fast in this town." Lily straightened her dress, her hands trembling slightly. "You saved my life. I do not even know your name." "It does not matter," he said. He turned to check his horse, checking the legs for injury. "Lily!" The shout came from the direction of the clinic. Silas Carrington was running toward them, his saber rattling, followed by Dr. Hart and Sheriff Amos Pike. Silas arrived first, his face flushed not with relief, but with a strange, dark fury. He looked at Lily, then at Coda. He stepped between them, effectively shoving Coda back with his shoulder. "Get away from her!" Silas snarled. He grabbed Lily's arm, his grip tight. "Are you all right? Did he harm you?" Lily pulled her arm back, wincing at his grip. "Harm me, Silas. Open your eyes. The wagon nearly crushed me." He pulled me out of the way. Silas glanced at the wrecked wagon, then back at Coda. He could not deny the physics of the situation, but his pride was stinging. He was the protector of this town, the hero in the uniform. Yet he had been sipping brandy while a savage performed the rescue. "He is a scout," Silas said dismissively, brushing dust from his sleeve. "He is paid to ride well. It is his job." He turned to Coda, his eyes cold. "You have done your duty. Now move along. This is not a place for you to be loitering." Coda looked at Silas. He was taller than the major, though he stood with less rigid posture. There was a dangerous stillness in Coda now. He looked at the major's hand, which was reaching for a coin purse. "I do not want your money," Coda said quietly. He looked past Silas, meeting Lily's gaze one last time. There was a spark there, a shared acknowledgement of the adrenaline, the fear, and the strangeness of the contact. Then, without another word, Coda vaulted back onto his horse. He signaled to his two companions, and they turned their mounts, riding slowly out of town toward the desert. "Extraordinary," Dr. Hart murmured. Finally arriving at his daughter's side, he checked her pulse instinctively. That was extraordinary riding. I have never seen a man move that fast. He is dangerous, Silas muttered, watching Coda's back recede. They are all dangerous when they get too close to decent people. Lily watched the dust settle where Coda had vanished. She could still feel the phantom pressure of his arm around her waist. It felt solid, protective. He saved me, Silas, she said softly. That is all that matters. For now, Silas said. Come, let us get you out of this sun. People are staring. The sun began to dip toward the western horizon, painting the sky in bruises of purple and orange. In the Gem Saloon, the initial shock of the accident had worn off, replaced by the warm buzz of whiskey and the darker undercurrent of prejudice. Sheriff Amos Pike sat at a corner table, nursing a lukewarm beer. He was an older man, with a mustache that drooped like a tired willow tree and eyes that had seen too many hangings. He listened to the conversation at the bar. Did you see how he grabbed her? A miner named Jeb was saying, slamming his glass down. Put his hands all over her. If that was my daughter, I would have put a bullet in him. He pulled her from the wagon. Jeb, the bartender argued half-heartedly, saved her neck. Does not matter, Jeb spat. It is not right. An Indian touching a white woman like that. It starts with a rescue, and it ends with them thinking they are our equals, thinking they can walk into our homes. Carrington did not look happy. Another man laughed. The major looked like he swallowed a toad. Carrington is right, Jeb insisted. We got too many of them skulking around. The railroad is coming. We need to clear the trash out before the civilized folk get here. Amos Pike sighed and tipped his hat down over his eyes. He could feel the mood shifting in Gray Mesa. Fear was a dry tinder, and hate was the spark. Silas Carrington knew that better than anyone. The sheriff knew about the secret meetings Silas held in the back of the hotel with the railroad surveyors. He knew they wanted the water in the Sacred Valley, but the valley belonged to the tribe by treaty. To get it, Silas needed a war. He needed the town to be terrified. He needed them to see Coda Blackhawk not as a savior, but as a threat. And today, Coda made a mistake. He had been a hero, and nothing made a small man hate a stranger more than knowing that stranger was a better man than him. Amos finished his beer. Storm is coming, he whispered to the empty glass. Out in the desert, 5 miles from town. Coda stopped his horse. He looked back at the lights of Gray Mesa flickering in the twilight. He looked down at his hand, the hand that had held the woman with the hair the color of dried wheat. He rubbed his palm against his buckskin trousers, as if trying to erase the sensation. Brother, one of his companions said, riding up beside him. You should have let the wagon hit her. One less enemy. Coda shook his head slowly. A dead woman is just a tragedy. A living one. He paused, not sure how to finish the thought. She looked at me. Tocho. She did not look at the Indian. She looked at the man. That is dangerous, the companion said. Yes, Coda agreed, turning his horse toward the dark mouth of the canyons and the Sacred Valley. That is the most dangerous thing of all. Night fell over the territory, hiding the survey stakes in shadow, but the lines had already been drawn in the dust. The lantern light in the office of the fort flickered, casting long, dancing shadows against the rough-hewn timber walls. The air was thick with the smell of stale tobacco smoke and expensive brandy, a scent that did not belong in the dusty outpost of Gray Mesa. Major Silas Carrington sat behind his desk, his boots propped up on the scarred wood. He swirled the amber liquid in his glass, watching the light catch the crystal. Across from him sat 2 men who looked like they had been carved from granite and bad intentions. One was Mr. Sterling, a representative of the Pacific Railroad, a man whose suit cost more than a year of a soldier's wages. The other was a mercenary named Dutch, whose face was a map of old knife fights. The natives are stubborn, Sterling said, adjusting his spectacles. They cling to that valley like a tick on a hound. The survey team says the grade through the Sacred Valley is perfect, flat, stable, direct. Going around the mountains will cost us 6 months and $50,000. Silas took a slow sip of his brandy. Money is just a number, Sterling, but time. Time is something we cannot buy back. He lowered his feet to the floor, the heavy thud echoing in the small room. The treaty protects them. As long as they remain peaceful, the army cannot move them. Washington loves its treaties. Dutch leaned forward, the leather of his gun belt creaking. Peace is fragile. Major, it breaks easily enough if you hit it hard. Silas smiled, a cold expression that did not reach his eyes. Precisely. The town is already on edge after the incident with Miss Hart and the scout. They are scared. Fear is the best kind of fuel. He slid a pouch of gold coins across the desk toward Dutch. I do not need a war. Gentlemen, not yet. I just need a tragedy, a family traveling alone, a brutal attack, something that looks savage. And the scout? Dutch asked, weighing the pouch in his hand. Blackhawk. He is useful for now, Silas said. But if he gets in the way, he is just another Indian who went rogue. Just make sure the men you use are convincing. Feathers, war paint, screaming. It will be done, Dutch said, pocketing the coin. Silas leaned back, interlacing his fingers. Just a few white bodies, gentlemen. That is all it takes. A few white bodies, and the good people of Gray Mesa will beg me to burn that valley to the ground. And I will be the hero who obliges them. Lily Hart walked softly across the parade grounds. The moon was high, washing the fort in a pale, ghostly light. She carried an empty basket. She had just delivered fresh bandages and a tincture of willow bark to the infirmary for a private who had been kicked by a mule. She felt a strange unease. The night was too quiet. As she passed the command building, she saw the glow of the lamp in the major's office. She paused, thinking she might say good night to Silas, despite her father's hopes. Her feelings for the major had cooled since the incident with the wagon, but courtesy was still required. She stepped onto the boardwalk, her boots making a soft sound on the wood. The window was open to let out the smoke. She heard the clink of glass. Then she heard the voice she had once thought was charming. Just a few white bodies. Gentlemen, that is all it takes. Lily froze. The words hit her like a physical blow to the stomach. She pressed herself against the wall, her heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. Make it messy, the rough voice of the mercenary added. The people need to see blood to believe it. Lily clapped a hand over her mouth to stifle a gasp. Her mind reeled. Silas, the man who brought her flowers, the man who spoke of civilization and order. He was planning murder. He was buying death just to steal land. She backed away slowly, terrified that a floorboard might creak. Once she hit the dirt of the parade ground, she turned and ran. She ran past the sentries who nodded sleepily at her. She ran until her lungs burned and the lights of the town were close enough to hide her shaking. The Devil's Pass was a narrow, twisting throat of rock 5 miles west of town. It was a place of shadows and echoes, where the wind whistled through the stone spires like a mourning woman. Coda Blackhawk crouched near a cluster of sagebrush, studying the ground. The morning sun was just cresting the peaks, but the tracks were from the night before. He traced the outline of a hoofprint with his finger. It was deep, heavy. Shod horses, he whispered to himself. His people rode unshod ponies, or horses with soft leather boots for stealth. These were iron shoes, heavy cavalry mounts or sturdy quarter horses. Yet, mixed in with the hoofprints were moccasin tracks. He stood up and walked a few paces to a rocky outcrop. Something glinted in the dirt. He picked it up. It was a brass shell casing, a .45 caliber cartridge. The metal was stamped with the mark of the U.S. Army Armory. Coda looked up at the cliffs above. The setup was perfect for an ambush. The tracks, the casing, the location, it all told a story that smelled of sulfur and lies. Someone wanted it to look like a Navajo raiding party had camped here. But Navajo warriors did not leave brass casings lying in the open. They reloaded every shell or hid them. They did not ride heavy horses that left tracks an inch deep in the hardpan. A trap, he murmured, from down the canyon. The sound of creaking wheels and the jingle of harness echoed. A wagon was coming. The Miller family had come from Ohio, chasing the promise of silver and sunshine. The father, Thomas, drove the team, while his wife, Martha, sat beside him, in the back, under the canvas cover. Their 2 children played with a wooden doll. "Almost there, Martha," Thomas said, wiping sweat from his brow. "Just through this pass, and we are in the valley." The first shot cracked through the air like a whip. Thomas jerked back, clutching his shoulder as blood bloomed on his shirt. "Get down!" he screamed. From the rocks above, figures emerged. They were painted with red and black stripes, wearing buckskins and feathers, but they moved with the heavy, stomping gait of men used to heavy boots. They fired down on the wagon with repeating rifles. Martha screamed as bullets splintered the wood of the wagon seat. The horses panicked, rearing up in the traces. Coda did not hesitate. He was 300 yards away. On the high ridge, he raised his Winchester and fired. His first bullet took one of the attackers in the leg. The man fell, cursing in English. "Damn it, where did that come from?" Coda worked the lever of his rifle, the metal action smooth and deadly. He fired again, suppressing the attackers on the south ridge. He could not save the wagon from the initial volley, but he could stop the slaughter. He spurred his horse, sliding down the treacherous scree slope toward the canyon floor. At the same time, from the eastern entrance of the pass, dust billowed. Sheriff Amos Pike and Lily Hart were riding patrol. Lily had insisted on checking the water holes for cholera, and the sheriff had insisted on escorting her. "Gunfire!" Amos shouted, drawing his peacemaker. Lily felt her blood turn to ice. She kicked her mare into a gallop, following the sheriff. They burst into the pass just as the wagon crashed onto its side. The Indians on the cliffs saw the lawman and the scout converging from 2 sides. Realizing their trap had been spoiled, they fired a final, chaotic volley and scrambled back into the rocks. "Hold fire!" Coda shouted, riding into the open, his rifle raised but not pointed at the wagon. "Check the family." Amos aimed his pistol at Coda for a split second, then recognized the scout. He lowered the gun and rode for the overturned wagon. Lily slid from her horse before it had fully stopped. She ran to the wreckage. Thomas Miller was groaning on the ground, pale and bleeding. Martha was weeping, trying to pull their son from the debris. "My daughter!" Martha screamed. "Where is Emily?" Lily looked around frantically. She saw a small patch of blue fabric under the splintered wood of the wagon bed. "Here, Sheriff, help me lift this." Amos and Coda moved together. The white lawman and the native scout gripped the heavy oak frame of the wagon. With a synchronized grunt of effort, they heaved it upward. Lily crawled underneath. The little girl, no more than 7 years old, was curled in a ball, terrified, bleeding from a graze on her arm. "It is all right," Lily whispered, her voice shaking but her hands steady. "I have got you." She pulled the child out. The girl was trembling violently, her eyes wide with shock. Lily quickly checked the wound. It was a flesh wound. Thank God! As she cleaned the blood with a strip of her petticoat, something fell from the folds of the girl's dress. A bullet. It had passed through the girl's sleeve and lodged in the fabric. Lily picked it up. It was heavy. Lead. She looked at Coda. He was standing over them, watching the cliffs, his chest heaving. He looked down at the bullet in her hand. "That is a government issue 45, Lily said softly. "The same ammunition the soldiers use at the fort." Coda crouched down beside her. He did not look at the bullet. He looked at her eyes. "And look at the ground. Miss Hart, look at the tracks on the ridge. Shod horses. My people do not shoe their horses for war." Lily looked at the cliffs where the attackers had fled. She remembered the voice in the office. Just a few white bodies. The horror of it made her nauseous. They were white men. The little girl, Emily, whispered. Her voice was tiny, like a dry leaf. "One of them, his paint came off. He had a beard like Papa." Lily and Coda exchanged a look. It was a look that bridged the chasm between their worlds, a shared, dangerous secret. They both knew the truth. The dust had barely settled when the thunder of hooves announced the arrival of the cavalry. Major Silas Carrington rode at the head of a column of 20 men. He looked impeccable, his face a mask of practiced concern. "Secure the perimeter," Silas barked. He jumped from his horse and strode toward the wreckage. My God, savage butchers. He looked at Thomas Miller, who was being tended to by the sheriff. Then he looked at Coda. You, Silas sneered. I might have known you would be here. Did you lead them here, Scout? Did you signal your brothers to attack? I drove them off, Coda said, his voice calm but hard as flint. And they were not my brothers. Lies, Silas spat. He turned to the crowd of soldiers. Look at this, a peaceful family destroyed. This is the work of the Navajo. This is war. No. The little girl, Emily, stepped forward, holding Lily's hand. They were not Indians. They were white men. I saw them. Silas turned to the child. His face softened into a pitying, condescending smile. Hush now. Child, you are in shock. You saw monsters, and your mind is confused. Indians paint their faces to scare little girls. It is a trick. She is telling the truth. Silas, Lily said, standing up. She held the bullet tightly in her fist, hidden in the folds of her skirt. She knew, with a sudden, terrifying clarity, that if she showed him the bullet now, he would kill them all. He would claim it was a crossfire. He would silence the witnesses. The attack, it was chaotic, but Coda saved them. Silas's eyes narrowed as he looked at Lily. He saw something in her face, a hardness he had not seen before. The scout is a convenient hero, Silas said dismissively. He sets the fire so he can put it out and look good. Sheriff Pike, take a statement from the survivors, but do not bother with the child's ramblings. She is delirious. He turned to his sergeant. Double the patrols. Send a rider to the governor. Tell him the Sacred Valley is harboring hostiles. We move in force within the week. Coda watched Silas. He saw the manipulation, the smooth way the major twisted reality. He wanted to reach for his knife, but he saw Lily's hand make a small, sharp motion, a signal to wait. That night, the moon was hidden behind clouds. The desert was a sea of black ink. Lily told her father she was going to the church to pray. Instead, she rode her mare to the edge of the Badlands, to a cluster of standing stones known as the Whisper Rocks. Coda was waiting for her. He stepped out of the shadows, silent as smoke. You should not be here, Coda said. If the major finds out you are meeting me, he will destroy you. He is destroying everything already, Lily said. She slid from her horse. She was still wearing her blood-stained dress from the morning. I heard him, Coda. Last night at the fort, he planned it. He hired men to attack that family. Coda nodded slowly. I found the tracks and the casings. He wants the valley for the railroad. He is going to kill innocent people, Lily said, her voice trembling with anger. He is going to start a war and call it justice. She stepped closer to him. The distance between them felt charged, electric. We have to stop him. Coda looked at her. He saw the daughter of privilege, the woman who had been safe in her white-clapboard house. He saw her choosing to walk into the fire. If you do this, Coda said, his voice low and rough, there is no going back. Your people will call you a traitor. My people will not trust you. We will be alone. I do not care what they call me, Lily said. She looked up at him, her chin lifted in defiance. I cannot be the wife of a murderer. I cannot be silent. It is a heavy price, Coda warned. I am willing to pay for it. Lily answered. Coda looked at the resolve in her face. He felt a strange shifting in his chest, a cracking of the walls he had built around his heart. He reached out, his hand hovering for a moment before he gently touched her shoulder. It was not a romantic touch. Not yet. It was the touch of a comrade sealing a pact. Then we fight, Coda said. Not with armies, but with the truth. We find the men he hired. We found the proof. How? Lily asked. We hunt, Coda said, turning his gaze toward the dark horizon where the Sacred Valley lay waiting. We hunt the hunters. Lily shivered, not from the cold, but from the realization of what she had just done. She had stepped off the edge of her world, and the only thing keeping her from falling was the hand of the warrior standing beside her in the dark. The weeks that followed the ambush at Devil's Pass were a blur of dust and deceit. The Arizona sun beat down on a landscape that was rapidly dividing into two hostile camps. On the surface, Gray Mesa was a town gripped by righteous fear. preparing to defend itself against a savage enemy. Underneath, in the shadows of the Red Rock Canyons, a fragile alliance was being forged. Lily Hart had become a woman of two lives. By day, she was the dutiful daughter of Dr. Jonathan Hart, rolling bandages and listening to the local women gossip about the impending Indian War. By late afternoon, she would ride her mare, Bess, out toward the painted cliffs, claiming she needed the solitude to sketch the changing light. In truth, she was meeting the enemy. She met Coda in a narrow fissure of rock known as Coyote's Throat, miles from the prying eyes of the town or the fort. It was a dangerous game. If Major Silas Carrington found out, Lily would be ruined, and Coda would be hanged. "The supply wagons are coming in 2 days," Lily said, handing a folded piece of paper to Coda. They stood in the cool shadow of the canyon wall, their horses restless nearby. "Silas has ordered 300 crates of ammunition. He is not planning a patrol. Coda, he is planning an invasion." Coda took the paper, his fingers brushing hers. The contact sent a jolt through her that she tried to ignore. He scanned the document, his brow furrowed. 300 crates. He means to burn the whole valley. "He calls it pacification," Lily said bitterly. "He had dinner with my father last night. He sat at our table, drank our wine, and spoke of bringing civilization to the wilderness. He acts as if he is a gardener pulling weeds." Coda looked up, his dark eyes searching hers. "And what did you say?" "I poured him more wine," Lily admitted, shame coloring her voice. "And I smiled. I feel like a spy in my own home." "Coda, my father thinks Silas is a hero. If he knew what I was doing, if he knew I was giving army movements to you, he would think you are a traitor," Coda finished for her. "Yes." Lily looked away, toward the slice of blue sky above the canyon rim. "Am I a traitor to my own people?" "You are loyal to the truth," Coda said. His voice was steady, grounding her. "That is a harder loyalty than blood." He stepped closer, and for the first time the distance between them felt less like a chasm and more like a magnetic field. "My brother Chayton thinks I am a traitor too. He says I smell like a fort. He says I have forgotten the names of our ancestors because I speak the white man's tongue." "It seems we are both homeless then," Lily whispered. Coda gave a rare, faint smile. It transformed his face, softening the harsh angles carved by wind and war. "Then we must build our own shelter. Miss Hart." The tension in Gray Mesa was suffocating. Every conversation in the general store, every sermon in the church, circled back to the Indian problem. One Tuesday morning, Lily was buying flour at the mercantile. Mrs. Gable, the mayor's wife, was holding court by the pickle barrel. "They say they eat the hearts of dogs." "Mrs." Gable whispered loudly, her eyes wide with theatrical horror. "And they steal children to raise as slaves. Major Carrington told my husband that the sacred valley is full of stolen gold. That is why they guard it so fiercely." "It is not gold," Lily said, unable to stop herself. The words hung in the air, silencing the shop. "Mrs." Gable turned, her bonnet ribbons quivering. "Excuse me, Lily." "It is not gold," Lily repeated, her hands trembling slightly as she clutched her basket. "It is their burial ground. It is their water source. They guard it because it is their home. Mrs. Gable, just as you would guard your front porch if strangers came with torches." The silence stretched, thick and uncomfortable. "Mrs." Gable sniffed, adjusting her shawl. "You always were a romantic child. Lily, too many books. You do not understand the nature of beasts. Beasts do not have homes. They have dens." "They are people," Lily insisted, her voice rising. "They are savages." A man spoke up from the back. It was the blacksmith, his face smudged with soot. "And come next week, when the major rides out, there will be fewer of them to worry about." Lily fled the store, her face burning. She felt the eyes of the town on her back pitying, suspicious, cold. She walked past the sheriff's office and saw Amos Pike standing on the boardwalk, whittling a stick. He looked at her, his expression unreadable, then tipped his hat slowly. Amos knew something was wrong with Silas's story, but he was a man who knew which way the wind blew. And right now, it was blowing a gale of hatred. 5 miles away, in the hidden encampment of the tribe, the wind was blowing just as hard. Coda stood before the council fire. The elders sat on buffalo robes, their faces lined like old maps. Chayton, Coda's younger brother, paced back and forth like a caged cougar. "We strike now," Chayton shouted, slamming his spear into the earth. "We catch them while they sleep. We burn the fort. We show them that the cost of our land is blood." And then Coda asked quietly, "After we burn the fort, do you think they will stop?" "Chayton, they have wires that carry voices across the mountains. They have the iron horse. If we kill 100 soldiers, they will send 1,000. We cannot win a war of numbers. So we die on our knees," Chayton spat, pointing a finger at Coda. "Like you ride their horses. You wear their guns. You meet with their women on the rocks." The accusation hung in the air. Coda stiffened. He did not know Chayton knew about Lily. Old Bear, the tribe's spiritual leader, raised a hand. His skin was like parchment, but his eyes were clear. "Peace, Chayton. Your brother walks a path you do not see. He walks a path to the white man's bed," Chayton sneered. "I walk a path to survival," Coda roared, his composure finally cracking. "I am trying to save your life. Brother, I am trying to save the lives of these children playing in the dirt. You want glory? Glory is a gravestone. I want a future." Old Bear looked at Coda, his gaze piercing. "The white men want the sacred valley. Coda, they do not just want the water. They want to break our spirit. If we give them the valley, we cease to be the people. We become dust in the wind. We must fight, but not with anger, with wisdom." Coda looked around the circle. He saw fear in the eyes of the mothers. He saw rage in the eyes of the young men. He felt the weight of 2 worlds crushing him. If he stopped the war, he was a coward. If he led the war, he was an executioner. 2 days later, the sky turned a bruised, sickly yellow. Lily had ridden out to meet Coda earlier than usual. The air was heavy, charged with static electricity. Her mare, Bess, was skittish, tossing her head and dancing sideways. Coda was waiting at the rendezvous point, a small plateau overlooking the dry riverbed. He looked grim. "You should not have come," he said as she dismounted. "The air tastes of copper. A storm is coming." "I had to tell you," Lily said, breathless. "Silas has moved the date. He is marching on Tuesday, 3 days from now." Coda cursed softly in his native tongue. "Tuesday. That is the day of the moon festival. The whole tribe will be gathered in the valley." "He knows," Lily said. "He wants to catch you all together." Before Coda could respond, the wind hit them. It did not build up. It arrived like a physical blow, a wall of red dust, 1,000 feet high, swept over the ridge, blotting out the sun instantly. The temperature dropped, and the world dissolved into a howling chaos of grit and noise. "Bess!" Lily screamed as her horse reared, panicked by the stinging sand. The reins were ripped from her hands, and the mare bolted into the brown oblivion. "Lily!" Coda grabbed her arm just as the wind threatened to knock her off her feet. "We cannot ride. We have to find cover." He pulled her toward the canyon wall. The sand was blinding, stripping the skin from their faces. They stumbled over rocks, guided only by Coda's memory of the terrain. He shielded her with his body, taking the brunt of the gale. "Here!" he shouted over the roar of the wind. He dragged her into a narrow fissure that opened into a small, shallow cave. It was barely big enough for 2 people, but it was out of the wind. They collapsed onto the sandy floor, gasping for air, covered in fine red dust. Outside, the world was ending. The sound was deafening, a continuous shriek of nature's fury. Inside, it was dark and surprisingly cold. Lily was shivering violently. The adrenaline was fading, leaving her shaking from shock and the sudden drop in temperature that accompanied desert storms. "We are trapped," she whispered, her teeth chattering. "The storm will last hours," Coda said. He moved to the back of the cave and pulled a heavy wool blanket from a cache he kept there for emergencies. He shook it out. We need warmth. The cold in the sandstorm kills faster than the heat. He sat down against the rock wall and pulled Lily toward him. Come here. There was no hesitation in her, no modesty, only the primal need for survival. She settled between his legs, her back against his chest, and he wrapped the blanket tightly around both of them, enclosing them in a cocoon of wool and body heat. For a long time, they just breathed. Lily could feel the solid thrum of his heart against her spine. She could feel the rise and fall of his chest. His arms were wrapped around her, his hands clasped over her stomach. It was intimate, more intimate than any ballroom dance or parlor conversation she had ever known. I thought I lost you in the wind, Coda said, his voice a low rumble near her ear. I thought I was gone, Lily admitted. She leaned her head back, resting it against his shoulder. Coda, why does Silas hate you so much? It feels personal. It is not just the land. Coda was silent for a moment. Outside, the wind howled like 1,000 ghosts. 10 years ago, Coda began, his voice distant. I was a young scout, just starting to work for the army. There was a skirmish in the Black Hills. A young lieutenant got separated from his unit. He was wounded, an arrow in his leg, dying of thirst. Lily turned her head slightly to look at his profile in the dim light. You found him. I found him, Coda said. I could have left him. My brother would have left him. But I dragged him 3 miles to the water. I cleaned his wound. I made a travois and pulled him back to the fort. It took 2 days. That lieutenant, Lily breathed, the realization dawning on her. It was Silas Carrington. Coda said, he was young, ambitious, and terrified. When we got to the fort, he did not thank me. He threw a coin at my feet. He told his commander he had fought his way back alone. He erased you, Lily said, anger rising in her chest. Worse, Coda said. He hates me because I saw him weak. I saw him beg for water. I saw him cry for his mother. To a man like Silas, that is a sin that cannot be forgiven. Every time he looks at me, he sees his own shame. He wants to destroy the valley, not just for the railroad, but because it is my home. He wants to wipe out the witness to his weakness. Lily twisted in his arms so she could face him. The blanket slipped, but neither moved to fix it. In the gloom, his eyes were pools of obsidian. He is a small man, Lily said fiercely. He is nothing compared to you. Coda looked at her. Her face was streaked with dust, her hair a wild tangle, her eyes burning with a protectiveness that stunned him. At that moment, she was not the doctor's daughter. She was a force of nature. You should not look at me like that, Lily, Coda warned softly. Like what? Like I am a hero. I am just a man who is tired of fighting. Maybe that is what a hero is, Lily said. She reached up, her hand trembling, and touched his cheek. Her thumb brushed away a smudge of red dust. Someone who keeps standing even when they are tired. The air in the cave changed. The sound of the storm seemed to fade into the background, replaced by the heavy, rhythmic thud of their hearts. Coda turned his face into her palm, inhaling the scent of her lavender soap and desert rain. He knew he should pull away. He knew that touching her was a death sentence, but he was a man who had lived on the edge of death for so long that life felt like an anomaly. Lily, he whispered, her name sounding like a prayer on his tongue. I know, she said, her voice barely audible. I know we cannot. I know it is impossible. It is forbidden, Coda said. By your laws, by mine. I do not care about the laws, Lily said, a tear cutting a track through the dust on her cheek. I care that when I was in that wind, the only thing I could think of was that I never told you. Told me what? That I have loved you since the moment you pulled me from that wagon. The confession hung between them, heavy and sweet. Coda closed his eyes for a second, fighting a battle harder than any ambush. Then he opened them and looked at her with a raw intensity that made her breath hitch. And I have loved you, Coda said. Since you looked at me and saw a man instead of a savage. He leaned in. He did not kiss her mouth. Instead, he pressed his forehead against hers, closing the distance but keeping the boundary. They breathed the same air, sharing the warmth. their bodies pressed together in the small cave. It was a chaste embrace, but the heat of it could have melted the stone around them. "Tell me about the valley," Lily whispered, needing to anchor herself, needing to keep from crossing the final line. "Tell me what we are saving." Coda took a deep breath, steadying himself. He kept his forehead against hers, his eyes closed. "The Sacred Valley," he began, his voice melodic and deep, "is called Canyon of the Sleeping Stars by my people. We believe that when a warrior dies, his spirit goes up to the Milky Way, but his heart returns to the valley earth to feed the grass. The water that flows there, it is not just water, it is the blood of our ancestors. To dam it, to pipe it away for steam engines. It is like draining the veins of our grandfathers." Lily listened, tears flowing silently now. She understood. It wasn't just geography. It was theology. It was a memory. Silas wasn't just stealing acres. He was committing spiritual genocide. "He cannot have it," Lily vowed into the darkness. "I will not let him have it." "We will stop him," Coda said. "Together." They stayed like that for hours, wrapped in the wool blanket and each other's strength, while the storm raged outside, trying to scour the world clean. But inside the cave, something new had taken root, something that no wind could blow away. By the time the wind died down, night had fallen. The moon rose over a transformed landscape. Dunes had shifted, trails had vanished, and the air was scrubbed clean and dangerously cold. Coda helped Lily out of the cave. They were stiff and cold as they separated from their embrace. The loss of his warmth hit Lily like a physical pain. "We have to walk back," Coda said, scanning the horizon. "Bess will have run back to the stable if she is smart. We are 10 miles out." "My father will be frantic," Lily said, dusting off her skirts. "Silas will be looking—" "Let them look," Coda said. He looked at her, his face serious. "But when we get back to town, we are strangers again. Lily, for your safety." "I know," she said. They walked in silence under the vast canopy of stars. It was a long trek, but neither complained. They were delaying the inevitable return to a world that wanted to tear them apart. When they finally reached the outskirts of Gray Mesa, it was past midnight. The town was quiet, but lights burned in the doctor's house and the sheriff's office. Coda stopped in the shadow of the livery stable. "Go! Through the back garden! I will vanish!" Lily turned to him. She wanted to kiss him. She wanted to scream at the unfairness of it all. Instead, she reached out and squeezed his hand for 1 second. "Be safe, Coda. Be brave, Lily." She turned and ran toward her house. Coda watched her go until she was safely inside the gate. Then he melted into the darkness, a ghost returning to the haunting. Inside the house, Dr. Hart was pacing the parlor, a glass of whiskey in his hand. Silas Carrington was sitting by the fire, looking grim. When Lily burst through the door, disheveled, covered in red dust, her hair wild, both men jumped up. "Lily!" Her father rushed to her, embracing her. "My God, we thought the storm had taken you. Where were you?" Lily looked at her father, then over his shoulder at Silas. She saw the cold calculation in the major's eyes. She saw the way he scanned her dirty dress, looking for signs of something. "I found a cave," Lily lied smoothly, her voice steady. "I sheltered alone. Bess ran off. I had to walk back." Silas walked over, stepping into her personal space. He smelled of cologne and arrogance. He reached out and picked a piece of red sandstone grit from her shoulder. "A cave," Silas said, his voice skeptical. "You are lucky, my dear. The desert is full of wolves, and worse." "I am fine, Silas," Lily said, meeting his gaze with a new steeliness she had forged in the storm. "I am stronger than I look." Silas smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "We shall see, Lily. We shall see." He turned to the doctor. "I am glad she is safe. Jonathan, now, if you will excuse me, I have a patrol to organize. We have reports of savages moving near the ridge. We ride on Tuesday." Lily felt her heart slam against her ribs. "Tuesday, the day of the massacre. as Silas left, closing the door behind him. Lily looked at her father. "Father," she said, "I need to sleep." "Of course, my dear," Dr. Hart said, kissing her forehead. "Rest. You're safe now." Lily went to her room, but she did not sleep. She sat by her window, looking out at the dark silhouette of the mountains. She touched her lips, remembering the phantom feel of Coda's breath. She was done being safe. It was time to be dangerous. Major Silas Carrington was a man who trusted no one, and that was the secret to his longevity. He stood by the window of his office, watching the dusty street through a pair of expensive field glasses. He adjusted the focus until Lily Hart came into sharp relief. She was walking toward the edge of town, a sketch pad tucked under her arm. "She goes out every afternoon at 3 o'clock, a voice rasped from the corner of the room. It was Dutch, the mercenary with the scar running down his cheek. "She rides to the painted cliffs, leaves her horse, walks into the rocks." "Does she sketch?" Silas asked, not lowering the glasses. "She talks," Dutch said, spitting a stream of tobacco juice into a brass spittoon. "To the Scout, Black Hawk." Silas lowered the glasses slowly. The leather grip creaked in his tightening fist. He had suspected it, but hearing it aloud felt like a slap to the face. The doctor's daughter, the woman he intended to make the centerpiece of his political rise, was conspiring with a savage. It was not just betrayal. It was an insult to his race and his rank. "Keep watching her," Silas said, his voice dangerously quiet. "But do not touch her. Not yet. I need to break her spirit before I can mold her back into something useful." The tension in Gray Mesa snapped 2 nights later. Chayton, Coda's younger brother, had lost his patience with the slow game of diplomacy. Under the cover of a moonless night, he led 4 young warriors to the Army supply depot on the outskirts of the fort. They carried torches and knives. Intending to burn the ammunition reserves, it was a disaster. Silas had doubled the guard, anticipating exactly this kind of desperation. Gunfire erupted at midnight, waking the entire town. The skirmish was brief and brutal. 3 warriors escaped into the darkness, but one, a boy named Little Fox, barely 16 years old, took a bullet in the leg. By dawn, Little Fox was chained to a post in the center of the parade ground. He had been beaten, his face swollen, but he refused to speak. Silas did not need him to speak. He needed him as a support. "Look at this," Silas shouted to the gathered crowd of townsfolk and soldiers the next morning. "They come in the night to burn us in our beds. This is not a skirmish. Good people, this is an act of war." The townspeople, frightened and angry, roared in agreement. Lily stood at the back of the crowd, clutching her shawl. She saw the blood on the boy's chest. She saw the cold calculation in Silas's eyes. He was using the boy's pain to paint a target on the entire sacred valley. Sunday morning brought a suffocating heat to the small wooden church of Gray Mesa. The pews were packed. The air smelled of stale sweat, lavender water, and self-righteousness. Lily sat beside her father, Dr. Jonathan Hart. The doctor looked tired, his eyes darting nervously toward Major Carrington, who sat in the front row, his uniform immaculate. After the sermon, Silas stood up and walked to the pulpit. The Reverend stepped aside, deferring to the power of the army. "Friends," Silas began, his voice smooth as oil, "in these dark times, we must find light where we can. We must cling to civilization, to family, to the future." He turned his gaze to Lily, a predatory smile fixing on his face. "I am honored to announce that Dr. Hart has granted me permission to join his family. Miss Lily Hart has agreed to be my wife." A murmur of approval rippled through the church. Women turned to smile at Lily. Men nodded at the doctor. It was a perfect trap. If she refused him now, she would humiliate him and her father. If she stayed silent, she was complicit. Lily felt the blood drain from her face. She looked at her father. He was smiling weakly, hoping this union would ensure her safety. Lily stood up. Her legs felt heavy, but her spine was steel. "No," she said. The word was not loud, but in the hush of the church, it sounded like a gunshot. Silas's smile faltered. "Lily, my dear, you are overcome with emotion. I am not overcome, Lily said, her voice rising, ringing clear off the rafters. She stepped into the aisle. I said no, I will not marry you. Silas Carrington. Sit down, Lily, her father hissed, grabbing at her skirt. You do not know what you are saying. I know exactly what I am saying, Lily said, pulling away. She looked directly at Silas. You speak of civilization, Major, but you orchestrate murder. You provoke children to fight so you have an excuse to kill them. You are not a protector. You are a butcher in a tailored coat. The silence that followed was absolute. It was the silence of a bridge burning, the structure collapsing into the river below. Silas's face went purple, then drained to a ghostly white. His eyes were two chips of ice. You are hysterical, Miss Hart. You have been in the sun too long. I have never seen things more clearly, Lily said. She turned and walked out of the church. No one moved to stop her, but as she passed the pews, she saw the faces of her neighbors turn away. She saw disgust. She saw hatred. She was no longer one of them. She was a traitor. Lily walked blindly toward the edge of town. She could not go home. The house would be unbearable when her father returned. She needed to breathe. She needed to warn Coda that the war was starting now. She reached the grove of cottonwood trees near the creek, a mile from town. It was a secluded spot, usually peaceful. A hand clamped over her mouth. Lily tried to scream, but a rough arm seized her waist, dragging her backward. She kicked and clawed, but her attacker was strong. Be still, witch! A voice growled in her ear. It was not a white man's voice. She was spun around and shoved against a tree trunk. Chayton stood there, his chest heaving, his eyes wild with grief and rage. Two other warriors stood behind him, holding horses. Chayton, Lily gasped. I am not your enemy. Liar, Chayton shouted. You feed the Major's hate. You whisper to him in church, and then my brother bleeds. Little Fox is in chains because of your people. I tried to stop it, Lily pleaded. You are a spy. Chayton spat. You twist my brother's mind. You make him soft. I will take you to the valley. We will see if the Major trades his guns for his woman. He will not, Lily cried. He does not care about me. He will use this to kill you all. Then you die first, Chayton said grimly. He threw her onto a horse, tying her hands to the saddle horn with rawhide. Ride. Coda found the tracks an hour later. He had been coming to meet Lily, to tell her about the captured boy, when he saw the scuffle marks in the cottonwood grove. He knew the hoof prints. He knew the way the unshod ponies moved. Chayton! He cursed, the sound tearing from his throat. He did not spare his horse. He rode hard, pushing the animal to its limit, cutting across the switchbacks of the devil's spine to intercept them before they reached the deep canyons. He caught them at the entrance to the Needle's Eye, a narrow slot canyon that served as a back door to the Sacred Valley. Stop, Coda roared, sliding his horse to a halt in a cloud of dust, blocking the path. Chayton pulled up, his hand going to the knife at his belt. Lily was slumped on the horse beside him, pale and terrified. Move, brother, Chayton warned. She is a prisoner of war. She is not part of this war, Coda said, dismounting. He walked toward them, his hands empty but ready. Let her go. Chayton, this is madness. Kidnapping a white woman brings the whole army down on us before we are ready. They are coming anyway, Chayton yelled, sliding off his horse. At least this way we have blood for blood. Chayton lunged. It was a fight born of a lifetime of rivalry. Chayton was younger, faster, fueled by rage. Coda was experienced, steady, fighting for something more than anger. They grappled in the dust, trading blows that cracked like thunder. Chayton struck Coda in the jaw, sending him staggering. Coda countered, sweeping Chayton's legs and pinning him to the ground. I do not want to hurt you, Coda shouted, holding his brother down. Then kill me, Chayton screamed, struggling, because if you choose her, you are dead to me anyway. Coda looked at his brother's face twisted with hate. He looked at Lily, bound on the horse. He made his choice. He shoved Chayton away and stood up, backing toward Lily. Go, Coda said to Chayton. Go back to the valley. Prepare the defenses. But she stays with me. Chayton stood up, wiping blood from his lip. He looked at Coda with cold finality. You are no longer Blackhawk. You are a ghost. Chayton whistled to the other warriors. They turned and vanished into the canyon, leaving Coda and Lily alone. Coda cut Lily's bonds. She fell into his arms, sobbing dry. Shaking sobs. I am sorry, she whispered. He thinks I betrayed you. He is blind with pain, Coda said. He held her for a second, then froze. In the distance, from the direction of town, came the sound of heavy hooves. Many horses, moving fast. Silas, Lily gasped. He must have had me followed. Dutch and his men, Coda confirmed, listening to the rhythm of the gallop. They are 5 minutes behind. We cannot outrun them on the open ground. Where do we go? Coda looked at the needle's eye, the narrow fissure in the rock wall. Through there. It leads to the caves. But the horses cannot fit. We have to go on foot. They slapped the horses, sending them running west to draw the pursuers off, then ran toward the crack in the stone. The needle's eye was agonizingly narrow. It was a jagged tear in the sandstone, barely wide enough for a man to turn sideways. They squeezed into the shadows just as Dutch and 6 armed riders crested the ridge. They are on foot, Dutch shouted, spotting the boot prints. Get in there, flush them out. Coda and Lily pushed deeper. The rock walls pressed against them, rough and cold. The passage narrowed until it was a tight squeeze. I cannot fit, Lily gasped, her Victorian dress layers of petticoats. The bustle, the heavy fabric was catching on the jagged stone. She was wedged tight. Push, Coda urged from ahead, reaching back to pull her hand. I am stuck, she panicked. Behind them, she could hear the boots of the mercenaries crunching on the gravel. They were coming. They had torches. The flickering orange light was dancing on the canyon walls. Coda looked at her. He saw the problem. The volume of her skirts was trapping her. We have to leave the dress, Coda said urgently. I cannot. Lily, they will kill us. She looked at him. His eyes were desperate. The torchlight was getting brighter. Rip my dress, she ordered, her voice trembling but fierce. Rip it off. If they find the fabric, they will think I fell, or that I was dragged. It will confuse them. Just do it. Coda hesitated for a fraction of a second. To destroy a woman's clothing was a violation of every code he knew, but looking at the trap closing around them, instinct took over. He gripped the heavy bombazine fabric at her waist. Forgive me, he whispered. With a sharp jerk, he tore the skirt. The sound was loud in the enclosed space. He pulled hard, ripping the heavy overskirt and the layers of petticoats away from the bodice. The fabric gave way with a violent shredding noise. Lily gasped as the cool air hit her legs. She was left in her chemise and bloomers, stripped of the armor of her civilization. Go, Coda hissed. He pulled her through the gap. The rock scraped her skin. As she stumbled over a loose stone, she fell forward into him. Coda caught her. They were pressed chest to chest in the dark, narrow space. Her hair had come loose, falling over her bare shoulders. The torchlight from behind cast a sudden, bright flare, illuminating the creamy whiteness of her skin against the dark rock. Coda's breathing was ragged. He held her tightly to keep her from falling. His face was inches from hers. He looked down at the curve of her neck, exposed and vulnerable. The adrenaline of the fight, the fear of death, and the sudden, overwhelming proximity of her body broke something inside him. He obeyed a command that had not been spoken. He leaned down, his mouth finding the sensitive cord of muscle at the junction of her neck and shoulder. His lips burned against her skin. It was not a gentle kiss. It was a desperate branding, a release of months of silent torture. Lily let out a sharp intake of breath, her hands clutching his arms, digging into his muscles. She did not push him away. She arched into him, her body betraying the same starving need. He held her there for a heartbeat too long, his mouth hot against her cool skin, savoring the pulse of her life under his lips. Then, the sound of a gunshot echoing at the canyon entrance shattered the moment. Coda pulled away, his eyes black and dilated. He was shaking. Move, he rasped. his voice unrecognizable. He grabbed her hand, and they ran deeper into the dark, leaving the torn remnants of her former life behind them on the stone floor. They ran until the sounds of pursuit faded into the silence of the earth. The cave system opened up into a larger cavern, cool and dry, smelling of ancient dust. Coda found a small alcove and stopped. He struck a match, lighting a small lantern he kept in his saddlebag, which he had grabbed before sending the horse away. The soft yellow light flooded the space. Lily sank to the floor, her legs giving out. She wrapped her arms around herself, suddenly conscious of her state of undress. Her chemise was torn at the shoulder, her bloomers dusted with red clay. Coda turned to look at her. He took off his buckskin jacket and draped it gently over her shoulders. The leather was warm from his body. "They will not find us here," Coda said quietly. He sat down opposite her, keeping a respectful distance, though the air between them was still vibrating from the moment in the passage. Lily pulled the jacket tighter. "I told Silas," she said, her voice hollow. "In the church, I told him he was a butcher." "I know," Coda said. "I heard the wind carry the news." "I have nothing left, Coda," she said, looking up at him, tears streaking the dirt on her face. "My home, my father, my name. It is all gone." "You have your life," Coda said. "Is that enough?" "It has to be." Lily looked at him, the bruises on his face from fighting his brother, the weariness in his posture. She crawled across the small space between them. She did not stop until she was kneeling right in front of him. "It is not enough," she whispered. "Not without you." Coda looked at her, his resolve crumbling. "Lily, I am a man with a price on his head. I have nothing to give you but dust and war." "I do not want gifts," Lily said. She reached out and touched his face, her fingers tracing the sharp line of his jaw. "I realized something in the storm, Coda, but I realized something else in that canyon. When you touched me—" "What?" Coda breathed. "That I would rather be hunted with you than safe with anyone else. You do not know what you are saying." "I do," she insisted. "Emda you antuluk an keo emkoi kat bao." "I have loved you since you pulled me from the sandstorm." Coda let out a shuddering breath. He reached up and covered her hand with his. "And I have thought of you," he confessed, his voice rough with emotion. "More than a man should think of a woman who belongs to the sky, while he belongs to the earth." "Then let the sky and earth touch," Lily said. She leaned forward and kissed him. It was not tentative. It was a collision. Coda groaned low in his throat and wrapped his arms around her, pulling her against him. The kiss was salt and dust and desperation. It was the taste of survival. They clung to each other in the flickering lantern light, two outcasts finding the only sanctuary that mattered. Coda's hands tangled in her hair. Lily's hands gripped his shirt. The world outside Silas, the railroad, the war faded away, leaving only the heat of their bodies and the truth of their hearts. The lantern flickered low, casting long shadows that eventually swallowed them in darkness. Morning came with a shaft of pale sunlight piercing the gloom of the cave. Lily woke first. She was lying on the hard ground, Coda's jacket serving as both pillow and blanket. Coda was sitting near the entrance of the alcove, his rifle across his knees, watching the light. He turned when she stirred. His expression was soft, unguarded. "Did you sleep?" she asked, sitting up and pulling the jacket around her. "A warrior learns to sleep with his eyes open," Coda said gently. A shadow fell across the entrance of the cave. Coda raised his rifle instantly, but then lowered it just as quickly. Old Bear stood there. The tribal elder leaned on a twisted staff, his eyes taking in the scene, the torn dress fabric Coda had retrieved to use as kindling, the intimacy of the space, the look on their faces. Lily flushed, pulling the jacket tighter, but she did not look away. Old Bear nodded slowly. He did not look angry. He looked sad, but resigned. "The hawk and the dove," Old Bear said, his voice like dry leaves. "I knew the wind was blowing this way." "Grandfather," Coda said, standing up. "We are not running." "No," Old Bear agreed. "You are done running. I saw the tracks in the canyon. I saw the soldiers searching the cliffs. They think you are dead or trapped deep underground. Silas will not stop, Lily said, standing up to stand beside Coda. No, he will not, Old Bear said. He looked at Lily. You have burned your bridges, daughter of the medicine man. You can never go back to being who you were. I do not want to go back, Lily said firmly. Old Bear smiled, a network of wrinkles appearing around his eyes. Good, because the path forward is steep. He looked at both of them. Love such as this, it brings both worlds to your door. The soldiers will come for her. The warriors will come for him. You must be ready to stand in the doorway and hold it shut. Coda looked at Lily. He saw the bruises, the dirt, the fear, and the overwhelming love in her eyes. We are ready, Coda said. Then come, Old Bear said, turning back to the light. The council meets, and it is time the truth was spoken not in whispers, but in a roar. Coda took Lily's hand. They stepped out of the cave, blinking into the harsh, bright light of the morning. They were no longer hiding. They were at war, but for the first time, they were fighting the same battle. The rumble of the approaching army felt less like the march of men and more like the grinding of tectonic plates. Major Silas Carrington did not just bring soldiers. He brought the machinery of conquest. Behind the column of blue-coated cavalry rolled heavy wagons loaded with timber and black powder. At the mouth of the Sacred Valley, where the river narrowed between high limestone walls, Silas halted his column. He did not order a charge. Instead, he ordered his engineers forward. Block it, Silas commanded, pointing to the rushing water. Build the cofferdam. If they want to hide in their hole, we will make sure they die of thirst in it. And if they try to break out, we will blow the supports and wash them away. It was a cruel, industrial strategy. The mercenaries, led by Dutch, worked alongside the soldiers, felling trees and piling sandbags. The water level began to rise behind the makeshift barrier, turning the lifeblood of the valley into a loaded weapon. Lily Hart rode a stolen mare that was foaming at the mouth. She had ridden through the night, taking goat paths that no horse should traverse, tearing her skin on mesquite thorns and bruising her legs against the saddle. She crested the final ridge and looked down into the bowl of the Sacred Valley. It was green, a shocking emerald jewel in the heart of the red desert. Smoke rose from the teepees. Halt! 2 warriors materialized from the rocks, arrows drawn. I need to speak to Coda. Lily gasped, her voice rasped by dust. They are coming, Silas is coming. The warriors hesitated, seeing a white woman in a torn chemise and a man's buckskin jacket, looking like a spirit of vengeance. Then, Coda emerged from the tree line. He ran to her as she slid from the horse, her legs giving way. He caught her before she hit the ground. Lily, he breathed, looking at her exhaustion. He has 300 men, Lily choked out, gripping his arms. And cannons, and Coda, he is damming the river. He is going to starve you out or drown you. Coda looked up at the canyon entrance. His face hardened into the mask of the war chief he was born to be. He turned to the warriors. Sound the horn. Gather the council. The war council was a storm of shouting. Chayton, Coda's brother, stood in the center, his face painted black for death. We ride out, Chayton roared. We kill them while they build their wall. We take their scalps. No. Coda stepped between his brother and the elders. If we ride into the open, their cannons will shred us. We are 50 warriors against 300, so we wait to die, Chayton challenged. We make them come to us, Coda said. His voice was cold, calculating. We use the canyon. We use the rocks. We do not kill the soldiers if we can help it. They are just boys following orders. We kill the mercenaries. And we take Silas. You are soft, Chayton spat. I am smart, Coda countered. If we slaughter the army, Washington will send 5,000 more. If we expose Silas as a murderer, the army will turn on him. He looked at Lily. She stood by the fire, washing the dust from her face. She nodded. Coda is right, she said, her voice clear. Sheriff Pike is coming. I sent word to him before I left. If he sees Silas attacking a peaceful camp, the law will be on your side." Chayton scoffed. "White law. It is the only shield we have left," Coda said. "Prepare the ambush." By noon, the sun was a hammer. Silas grew impatient. The dam was holding back a massive swell of water, but the valley remained silent. "Advance," Silas ordered. "Burn the village. Bring me the girl." The cavalry moved in. As they entered the narrow throat of the canyon, the silence stretched, heavy and suffocating. The horses' hooves clattered on the stone. Then, a hawk screeched high above. It was the signal. From the rim of the canyon, arrows rained down. They did not aim for the men. They struck the ground in front of the horses, causing chaos. The formation broke. "Fire!" Silas screamed. The soldiers fired blindly at the cliffs. The retort of the rifles echoed deafeningly. Coda rose from behind a boulder on the canyon floor, his Winchester in hand. He fired 3 shots in rapid succession. 3 mercenaries fell. "Precision!" Coda shouted to his men. "Do not shoot the uniforms unless you must." The battle descended into a choking cloud of dust and black powder smoke. Men shouted. Horses screamed. Coda moved through the chaos like a phantom, striking and vanishing. Lily was crouched behind a supply wagon that had been overturned. She was not hiding. She was working. A young private, no more than 18, stumbled near her, an arrow through his shoulder. He fell, clutching the wound. Lily crawled out. She dragged the boy to cover. "Stay still," she ordered, ripping her petticoat, what was left of it, to make a compress. "Miss Hart!" the boy gasped, his eyes wide. "The major said you were a prisoner." "The major lied," Lily said, tightening the bandage. A shadow fell over them. A warrior raised a tomahawk to strike the soldier. "No!" Lily shouted, throwing herself over the boy. "He is out of the fight." The warrior paused, confused. Then he saw who she was, the woman of Blackhawk. He lowered his weapon and ran back into the fray. At the canyon entrance, Sheriff Amos Pike arrived with a posse of 20 deputized citizens. They reined in their horses, staring at the scene. They saw Silas Carrington standing on a supply crate, safe in the rear, ordering his men to fire a cannon into the village where women and children were fleeing. "That is not a rescue," Amos muttered. "That is a slaughter." Amos drew his pistol and fired a shot into the air. "Carrington, order your men to stand down." Silas turned, his face twisted with fury. "This is a military operation. Sheriff, stay back or I will have you shot for treason." "You are firing on civilians," Amos shouted back. "And you are blocking a federal waterway." Silas laughed, a manic sound. "I am the law here, burn them all." He grabbed a torch from a nearby soldier and threw it toward a cluster of dry brush near the canyon wall, trying to smoke the defenders out. The wind caught the fire instantly. The flames roared up, threatening to trap both the tribe and the soldiers. Lily saw the fire. She looked up at the wooden dam upstream. The water was straining against the timbers. If the fire reached the dam, or if Silas detonated the charges he had planted to drown them, the valley would be destroyed. "The dam," she whispered. She looked around. Coda was engaged in hand-to-hand combat on the ridge. She could not reach him. She saw Chayton near the riverbank, firing his rifle. Lily ran. She sprinted across the open ground, bullets kicking up dust around her boots. "Chayton!" she screamed. The warrior turned, his gun leveled at her. "The dam," Lily pointed. "Silas has rigged it with powder. If we do not blow it now, he will flood the village." Chayton looked at the dam, then at the fire spreading toward the teepees. He looked at Lily. He saw the blood on her hands, white blood and red blood mixed together. "I have dynamite," Chayton said, pulling a bundle of red sticks from his satchel. "Stolen from the mine. We have to place it at the center piling," Lily said. "It is the only way to break the seal without drowning everyone." "A controlled break." Chayton hesitated for a fraction of a second. Then he nodded. "Run." They ran together, the white woman and the Apache warrior. They splashed into the river, the water icy cold against their legs. They waded toward the dam under heavy fire. "Cover us," Coda shouted from the ridge. Seeing them, He stood up, exposing himself to draw fire, picking off the mercenaries who aimed at the river. Lily and Chayton reached the dam. Chayton jammed the dynamite into the wet timbers. He struck a match. "Go!" Chayton shoved Lily toward the bank. She scrambled up the mud. Chayton lit the fuse and dove into the water. The explosion was not a sharp crack, but a deep, heaving thud that was felt in the chest before it was heard. The center of the dam disintegrated. The water did not crash down in a tidal wave. It surged forward in a powerful, expanding release. It hit the fire that Silas had started, extinguishing the flames in a massive cloud of hissing steam. The sudden flood rushed toward the army's position at the canyon mouth. It was not deep enough to drown, but it was powerful enough to smash the cannon, overturn the supply wagons, and knock the horses off their feet. The soldiers, wet and disoriented, dropped their weapons. The gunpowder was soaked. The battle was effectively over. Silas Carrington stood on his crate, watching his war dissolve into mud. He looked up. Coda was standing on the ridge directly above him. "Carrington!" Coda's voice echoed over the canyon. Cutting through the steam, Silas looked up, his face pale. He drew his pearl-handled revolver. "Come down here! Savage face me!" Coda jumped. He slid down the scree slope, landing in the mud 10 yards from Silas. He did not draw his knife. He walked forward. Silas fired. The bullet struck Coda in the left shoulder. Coda stumbled back, the impact spinning him around. Blood sprayed onto the wet rocks. "No!" Lily screamed from the riverbank. Coda did not fall. He regained his balance. He looked at the wound, then back at Silas. He kept walking. Silas fired again. Click. A wet cartridge. Silas threw the gun down and drew his saber. "I should have let you rot in the desert 10 years ago." Coda stepped inside the swing of the saber. He caught Silas's wrist with his right hand. The grip was iron. "You did not save me," Coda said, his face inches from the major's. "I saved you, and today, I save my people." Coda twisted. There was a sickening crack of bone. Silas screamed and dropped the sword. Coda swept his legs, sending the major splashing face first into the mud. Coda stood over him, his knife drawn now. The entire valley held its breath. The soldiers, the warriors, the sheriff, everyone watched. Coda raised the knife. "Do it!" Silas shrieked, spitting mud. "Make me a martyr." Coda looked at the knife. He looked at Chayton, who was watching from the water. He looked at Lily, who was running toward him. Coda sheathed the knife. "No," Coda said loud enough for the sheriff to hear. "I will not give you a soldier's death. You are a criminal. You will face the law." He grabbed Silas by the collar and dragged him toward Sheriff Pike. He threw the major at the lawman's feet like a sack of wet flour. "He is yours," Coda said. Then, Coda's legs gave out. Lily reached him just as he hit the ground. She fell to her knees in the mud, heedless of the filth. "Coda!" She ripped the buckskin jacket open. The bullet had passed through the shoulder. It was bleeding heavily, pulsing with his heartbeat. "I am fine," Coda rasped, his face gray. "You are a terrible liar," Lily said, tears streaming down her face mixed with soot. She pressed her hands over the wound, applying pressure. The world seemed to stop. In the middle of the devastated canyon, surrounded by smoke and steam, the white doctor's daughter cradled the head of the Apache war chief in her lap. Her dress was gone, replaced by rags. Her skin was stained with his blood. Chayton walked up. He stood over them. He looked at his brother, then at Lily. He saw her hands pressing into the wound, trying to keep the life inside his brother's body. Chayton knelt down. He did not push Lily away. He placed his hand over hers, adding his strength to the pressure. "He lives?" Chayton asked. "He lives?" Lily wept. "He has to—" Sheriff Pike walked over, handcuffing a sputtering Silas Carrington. The sheriff looked at the scene, the three of them in the mud. "Dr. Hart is coming," Pike said gently. "The wagon is on its way." Coda opened his eyes. He looked up at Lily. The pain was blinding, but his vision was clear. He saw the woman who had defied an empire for him. "The water," Coda whispered. "It flows," Lily said, smoothing the hair back from his forehead. "You did it! Coda, the valley is safe!" Coda closed his eyes, his hand finding hers under the blood-soaked cloth. He held on, anchoring himself to the earth, to the valley, and to her. The sun broke through the smoke, illuminating the tableau. It was a picture that would be painted and whispered about for 100 years in the territory the day the river washed away the hate, leaving only the raw, bleeding truth of love behind. The dust of the battle had settled, but the air in Gray Mesa remained thick with the static of unfinished business. The arrival of Colonel James Sterling from Fort Defiance 3 days later turned the dusty frontier town into a makeshift tribunal. The hearing took place in the dining room of the Grand Hotel, the only space large enough to hold the weight of the accusations. Colonel Sterling sat at the head of a long oak table, his face a mask of weary authority. He was a man who had fought in the Civil War and had seen enough blood to know the difference between a soldier and a butcher. Major Silas Carrington stood before him, stripped of his saber and his command, but not his arrogance. His uniform was cleaned, but his eyes were frantic, darting around the room like a trapped coyote. "This is a conspiracy, Colonel," Silas argued, his voice cracking with indignation. "I was suppressing an insurrection. The scout, Black Hawk, is a known agitator, and the woman, she is hysterical, compromised by her association with the hostiles." Lily Hart sat on a wooden chair to the left of the colonel. She wore a simple gray dress borrowed from Widow May, as her own clothes had been destroyed in the canyon. She looked tired. Her hands were raw from climbing rocks, and her face was thin, but her eyes were dry and clear. "I am not hysterical, Colonel," Lily said. Her voice was quiet, forcing the room to lean in. "And I am not compromised. I am a witness." She placed a leather satchel on the table. It contained the documents she had stolen from Silas's office weeks ago, along with the surveyor's maps she and Coda had recovered from the wreckage of the dam. "These are the Major's private ledgers," Lily explained. "They detail payments from the Pacific Railroad Company, not to the Army, but to a private account in St. Louis under his name. And here, a plan to divert the water from the Sacred Valley to a proposed station 5 miles east, a station that does not exist yet." Colonel Sterling opened the ledger. He ran a finger down the column of figures. He looked at the map, seeing the red ink that crossed out the tribal lands. Sheriff Amos Pike stepped forward. He took off his hat, twisting the brim in his hands. "I saw him fire on the village. Colonel, there were women and children. No weapons were raised against him until he burned the brush. He tried to drown them to hide his mistake." The colonel closed the ledger with a heavy thud. He looked at Silas. "You used United States troops as personal mercenaries. Major, you fabricated reports of attacks, and you fired on civilians." "They are savages," Silas screamed, his composure shattering. "They are standing in the way of progress. I did what had to be done. You did it for profit," Colonel Sterling said coldly. "Major Carrington, you are relieved of duty. You will be transported to Fort Leavenworth to face a general court-martial." As 2 guards dragged Silas away, he looked back at Lily. There was no love left in his eyes, only a black, bottomless hate. Lily did not look away. She watched him until the door closed, severing the tie that had nearly strangled her life. The removal of Silas Carrington did not fix the world overnight, but it stopped the bleeding. The railroad company, seeing their secret deal exposed and their military muscle removed, sent a new representative, Mr. Eubanks was a pragmatic man who preferred ink to gunpowder. The treaty was signed a week later, not in a grand hall, but on the porch of the sheriff's office. Old Bear sat on a buffalo robe, representing the tribe. Mr. Eubanks sat in a crate. It was not a perfect victory. The tribe had to concede a right-of-way for a spur line that would skirt the southern edge of the jagged peaks, miles from the valley floor. In exchange, the Army recognized the Sacred Valley and its water source as sovereign territory. "The water stays free," Old Bear said, his voice rasping like wind over sandstone. "But we will allow a pipe to the town, for the families, for the horses, but not for the steam engines. The town will pay a monthly fee for the maintenance of the reservoir, Lily added, translating the terms she had helped draft. And no soldier may enter the valley without an invitation. Mr. Eubanks grumbled, calculating the lost profits. But he signed. He knew the alternative was a guerrilla war that would cost 10 times as much. When the ink dried, there was no cheering, just a collective exhale. It was a peace built on compromise, fragile and new, like green grass shooting up after a wildfire. Coda Blackhawk did not attend the signing. He was lying on a cot in a large canvas tent set up on the edge of town, halfway between the white settlement and the open desert. The bullet had shattered his collarbone and torn through the muscle of his shoulder. For 3 days, fever had raged through him, a fire hotter than the one Silas had set. Lily was there. She changed his bandages every 4 hours. She sponged his forehead with cool water. She fought the infection with the desperation of a woman who had already lost too much. On the 4th morning, the fever broke. Coda opened his eyes. The world was blurry, then sharpened into the image of the canvas ceiling. He turned his head. Pain spiked through his shoulder, white and hot. But it was the pain of healing, not dying. Lily was asleep in a chair next to the cot, her head resting on her arms. "Lily," he whispered. His throat felt like it was full of sand. She woke instantly. She blinked, disoriented, then saw his open eyes. A look of sheer, terrifying relief washed over her face. "You are back," she said. Reaching for a cup of water, she lifted his head gently to help him drink. "Did we win?" Coda asked, the water soothing the fire in his throat. "Silas is gone," Lily said softly, brushing the hair back from his damp forehead. "The valley is safe. There is a piece of paper with a seal on it." Coda let out a long breath. He looked down at his shoulder, swathed in white cotton. "I will not draw a bow for a long time." "You will have scars," Lily said. Her fingers traced the edge of the bandage. "Bad ones." "A warrior without scars is just a boy with a weapon," Coda murmured. He looked at her, really looked at her. "And did the town forgive you?" Lily smiled, a sad, crooked thing. "Some did. Some cross the street when they see me. They say I chose the savage over the soldier." "They are right," Coda said. "Yes," Lily agreed, leaning down to press a kiss to his forehead. "I made the best trade of my life." Later that afternoon, the tent flap opened. Dr. Jonathan Hart stepped inside. He carried his medical bag, but he held it like a shield. He looked at Coda, then at his daughter. The silence was thick. For 20 years, Jonathan Hart had believed that civilization ended where the pavement stopped. He had believed that men like Coda were part of the landscape, dangerous, wild, and ultimately lesser. But he had seen Coda step in front of a bullet. He had seen Coda spare Silas's life when revenge was just a knife stroke away. "Doctor," Coda said, trying to sit up. Lily moved to help him, but Coda waved her off. He needed to face this man upright. "Stay down, son," Dr. Hart said. The word son hung in the air, foreign and heavy. "You will tear the sutures." The doctor walked to the bedside. He checked Coda's pulse. He inspected the wound with professional detachment. But his hands were gentle. "The infection is gone," Dr. Hart said. "Lily did good work. Better than I could have done." "She has good hands," Coda said. Dr. Hart looked at Coda. "You saved my life in the canyon. A piece of shrapnel from the cannon. You pushed me down." "You were in the way," Coda said simply. "I was," the doctor admitted. He sighed, looking aged and weary. "I was in the way of a lot of things. I thought I was protecting her. Coda. From you. From your world." "It is a hard world," Coda acknowledged. "Perhaps," Dr. Hart said. "But I saw you protect the Miller family. I saw you hold the line. I was taught that a gentleman is defined by his honor." He paused, his voice thick with emotion. "I fear I have been saluting the wrong uniforms." He reached out and, for the first time, offered his hand to the scout. Not as a doctor to a patient, but as a man to a man. "Thank you," Jonathan said. Coda took his hand. The grip was firm. "She is the stubbornest woman I have ever met. Doctor, you raised her well." Outside the tent, another reconciliation was taking place. Chayton stood by the river, watching the water flow toward the town. He wore his war paint, but it was smeared and fading. Coda walked out, leaning heavily on Lily. He stopped a few feet from his brother. Chayton turned. He looked at the bandages. He looked at the way Lily supported Coda's weight. "The elders say you are a hero," Chayton said. There was no mockery in his voice, only a quiet resignation. "They say the treaty is a victory. It is survival." "Chayton," Coda said. "I wanted to kill them." Chayton admitted. "When the dam broke, I saw them washing away. I felt good." "Is that wrong?" "It is not wrong to be angry," Coda said. "It is only wrong to let anger blind you. If we had killed them all, Chayton, we would be running for the rest of our lives. Today, we stand still." Chayton looked at the ground. He kicked a stone into the river. "You walk a hard road, brother. You walk with 1 foot in the river and 1 foot on the bank. It is the only way to build a bridge," Coda said. Chayton looked at Lily. For months, he had looked at her with hatred. Now, he looked at her with a grudging respect. She had blown the dam. She had saved his brother. "She rides well," Chayton muttered. It was the highest compliment he could give. He nodded to Coda, then turned and walked back toward the valley. He would not embrace the white world that was not his path, but he would no longer try to burn it down. In the weeks that followed, Gray Mesa began to change. It was slow, painful, and often ugly, but it changed. Lily Hart was no longer invited to the tea parties of the mayor's wife. When she walked down Main Street, whispers followed her. Traitor, Indian lover. But not everyone whispered. The Miller family, the ones Coda had saved at Devil's Pass, brought a basket of eggs to Lily's door every Tuesday. The blacksmith, whose son Lily had treated on the battlefield, tipped his hat when she passed. And Widow May, the owner of the boarding house, did something unprecedented. She put a sign in her window, "All travelers welcome." When a group of tribal elders came to town to trade, May invited them onto her porch and served them coffee. It was a scandal. It was a revolution. "Why?" Lily asked May one afternoon, helping her shell peas on the porch. "Because my husband died in a war over hate," May said, looking at the distant mountains. "I am too old to keep feeding that fire, and besides," she winked at Lily, "you two look damn good together. Give an old woman hope." Lily and Coda sat by the fire in her father's house that evening. Coda was healing well, his arm in a sling. "We could go," Coda said, "to California, to Mexico. There are places where no one knows our names." Lily looked around the parlor. This was her home. These were her books, her memories. "If we leave," Lily said, "then Silas wins. He wanted to clear us out. If we run, we admit that we do not belong here. It will not be easy," Coda warned. "Their eyes are heavy." "Let them look," Lily said. She reached out and took his hand. "We fought for this valley. Coda, we fought for this town. It belongs to us as much as it belongs to them. We are the bridge. If the bridge leaves, the two sides fall apart again." Coda nodded. He knew she was right. They were the scar tissue that held the wound together. It was tougher than the original skin, but it would always look different. 2 months after the Battle of the Sacred Valley, on a crisp autumn morning, a small group gathered at the rim of the canyon, overlooking the healing land. It was not a church wedding. It was not a tribal ceremony. It was something in between. Old Bear stood with his face to the east. Sheriff Amos Pike stood with his hat in his hands. Dr. Hart stood beside his daughter, looking proud and a little terrified. Widow May and Chayton stood as witnesses, the unlikely pair flanking the couple. Lily wore a dress of pale blue calico, sewn by Widow May. It was simple, practical, and beautiful. Coda wore a new buckskin tunic, embroidered with the symbol of the hawk, but he wore trousers and boots of the white man. There was no priest. Old Bear spoke first. "The earth does not know the difference between 2 feet, Old Bear said, his voice carrying over the wind. "It only knows the weight of the step. These two walked together. Their path is one path. He took a small clay pot of water from the sacred river and poured it over their joined hands. Then, Dr. Hart stepped forward. He cleared his throat. He opened a Bible, but he did not read a verse about submission or obedience. He read from the Song of Solomon, "Many waters cannot quench love, neither can the floods drown it." He closed the book. He handed Coda a plain gold ring. Coda placed it on Lily's finger. Lily took a leather cord, braided with turquoise and silver beads, a necklace she had made herself, and placed it around Coda's neck. "With this ring," Coda said, his English formal and soft. "With this bead." Lily replied, "We bind the worlds," they said together. Coda leaned down and kissed her. It was not the desperate, frantic kiss of the cave. It was a kiss of promise. It was slow, deep, and public. Sheriff Pike blew his nose loudly into a handkerchief. Chayton looked away, hiding a faint smile. As they broke the kiss, the wind swept up from the canyon floor. It smelled of sage and wet soil. It smelled of freedom. Lily looked out at the vast, broken, beautiful landscape. She looked at the scars on Coda's neck, and he looked at the calluses on her hands. They were imperfect people in an imperfect land. "Ready?" Coda asked, offering his good arm. "Ready," Lily said. They turned and walked back toward the town, not as a white woman and a native scout, but as a family. The sun was high, casting no shadows, leaving nowhere to hide, and they did not want to hide anymore. 5 years had passed since the waters of the Sacred Valley had washed away the ambitions of Major Silas Carrington. The year was 1880. The Arizona Territory was changing, shifting under the relentless pressure of the industrial age. But in the high desert surrounding Gray Mesa, the change had taken a different shape. It was not the crushing weight of conquest, but the slow, intertwining growth of two roots in the same soil. The Pacific Railroad had come. Finally. Its iron tracks shimmered in the heat, cutting a silver line across the southern horizon. But the tracks did not sever the heart of the Sacred Valley. They curved around the jagged spine of the Devil's Anvil, a respectful detour that cost the investors an extra $50,000 and saved a civilization. The train whistle blew every day at noon, a lonely, mournful sound that echoed off the canyon walls to the people of Gray Mesa. It was no longer a war cry, but simply a clock on the edge of town, where the dusty main street gave way to the scrub brush of the reservation lands. A new building stood. It was a long, low structure made of adobe brick and timber, with a wide porch that offered shade to anyone who sought it. Above the door, a hand-painted sign read, "The Junction." It was a trading post, but it was also a neutral ground. Here, women from the tribe brought woven baskets and turquoise jewelry to trade for steel needles and bolts of calico. Here, miners from the hills sat on barrels drinking coffee alongside young braves who were curious about the workings of a pocket watch. Inside the main room, the air smelled of chalk dust and dried sage. Lily Blackhawk stood at the front of the room, wiping a slate board with a damp rag. She is 31 years old now. The sun had etched fine lines at the corners of her eyes, and her hands were rougher than they had been when she was a debutante in St. Louis. But she moved with a confidence that filled the room. "Repeat after me," Lily said, looking out at her students. Sitting on the wooden benches were 20 children. Half of them wore the buckskins and moccasins of the Apache. The other half wore the cotton shirts and suspenders of the town settlers. "Water," Lily said in English. "Water," the children chorused. "Two," she said in the tribal dialect. "Two," they repeated. In the back of the room, an old man sat in a rocking chair, whittling a toy horse. It was Dr. Jonathan Hart. His hair was completely white now, and his hands shook with a mild tremor that had forced him to retire from surgery. But his mind was sharp. He watched his daughter teach with a look of profound peace. "Dr. Hart," a small boy called out. He was a settler's child, with hair like corn silk. "My bandage is coming loose. Come here, Thomas," Dr. Hart said, beckoning the boy. "Let me show you how to tie a knot that even a wild pony could not shake loose." As the doctor tended to the boy, A shadow fell across the open doorway. Coda Blackhawk stepped inside. He did not look like the scout who had once haunted the edges of the garrison. He walked with the easy stride of a man who owns the ground beneath his feet. He wore trousers and a linen shirt, but his hair was still long, tied back with the leather thong Lily had beaded for him. The scar on his shoulder, hidden beneath the fabric, was a jagged reminder of the price he had paid for this piece. "Class is dismissed," Coda announced, his voice deep and carrying a hint of amusement. "The sun is high and the river is cool." A cheer went up from the benches. The children scrambled out the door, a chaotic tumble of limbs and laughter, mixing together as they ran toward the creek. There was no segregation in their play. They were simply children in the desert. Lily smiled, placing the chalk on the ledge. She walked over to her husband. "You are disrupting my curriculum, Mr. Blackhawk." "I am teaching them biology," Coda countered, leaning down to kiss her cheek. "The biology of swimming on a hot day." "Is the council meeting over?" Lily asked, her tone turning serious. "It is," Coda said. "Mr. Eubanks from the railroad is not happy about the price of beef, but he paid it. He knows that if he tries to cheat us, the supply line stops." "He knows he cannot fool you," Lily said, touching his arm. Coda looked out the window at the retreating children. "He knows I have read his contracts better than he has. The pen is heavier than the tomahawk. Lily, you taught me that." Coda was no longer just a warrior. He had become the voice of the sacred valley. He spent his mornings teaching the young men of the tribe not just how to track a deer or string a bow, but how to read a map, how to negotiate a trade deal, and how to understand the laws that govern the white world. To fight an enemy, Coda would tell them, sitting by the fire, you must know his mind. You must know his language better than he knows yours. We do not fight to kill anymore. We fight to remain. It was not always easy. There were still young men, like his brother Chayton once was, who wanted to burn the tracks. And there were still men in town who spat on the ground when Coda walked by. But the violence had been replaced by a tense, grudging respect. The town needed the water. The tribe needed the trade goods. Necessity had forged a bond that idealism never could. Coda walked with Lily out onto the porch. Dr. Hart followed, leaning on his cane. "Where is he?" Dr. Hart asked, scanning the yard. "There," Coda pointed. In the dusty corral, a small boy of 4 years was chasing a stray dog. He had his mother's wide, intelligent eyes and his father's copper skin. He was laughing, a sound that seemed to vibrate in the clear air. His name was Hania, in the language of the tribe. It meant spirit warrior. But Lily and Coda had chosen it for an older, deeper meaning rooted in the legends The Bridge. "Hania," Dr. Hart called out. The boy stopped and ran toward them. "Grandfather, did you see I almost caught the tail?" "If you catch the tail, you catch the teeth," Dr. Hart warned gently, patting the boy's head. "Speak English." "Hania." "What did you tell the dog?" "I told him to sit," Hania said proudly. "But he only speaks Apache." Coda laughed, lifting his son into his arms. "Then you must teach him, little wolf, just as your mother teaches the town." Hania wriggled to get down. "Uncle Chayton is waiting. He said he would show me how to find a lizard." "Go then," Coda said, setting him down. "But watch for snakes." They watched the boy run toward the tree line, where Chayton was waiting. Chayton, older and scarred, but standing tall, raised a hand in greeting to Coda. The brothers had found their peace. Chayton guarded the old ways in the deep valley, while Coda guarded the future at the edge of the world. That evening, as the sun began to dip below the horizon, painting the sky in violent shades of violet and blood orange, Lily and Coda rode their horses up the switchback trail to the high ridge overlooking the sacred valley. It was their ritual. Once a week, they left the school, the council, and the responsibilities of leadership to stand on the precipice where their lives had almost ended. They dismounted and walked to the edge. Below them, the valley was a bowl of deepening shadow, but the river caught the last light, winding like a ribbon of molten gold through the green. The dam that Silas had built was long gone. Its timbers rotted and washed away, leaving the water to flow free and wild. Lily leaned against Coda, wrapping her shawl tighter against the evening chill. "It looks peaceful," she said. "It is peaceful." Coda agreed. "For now." "Do you miss it?" Lily asked suddenly. "The silence before school, before the railroad." Coda thought for a moment. He looked at his hands that now held pens and ledgers as often as they held reins. "I miss the simplicity. A track was just a track. The enemy was just a man in a blue coat. Now, the enemies are invisible. Greed, pride, fear. We are winning. Though," Lily said, "Hania has friends in town who do not care about the color of his skin. That is a victory." "It is," Coda said. He turned to look at her. The dying light illuminated her face, softening the lines of age and highlighting the enduring beauty of her strength. "And I have you. That is the only victory I ever truly needed." Lily smiled, a mischievous glint appearing in her eyes. She looked at the rocky path that led down into the narrow fissure of the Needle's Eye, the place where they had been trapped 5 years ago. "Do you remember?" Lily said, her voice dropping to a playful whisper. "That terrible afternoon in the canyon when we were squeezed between the rocks like 2 rats in a trap." Coda chuckled, the sound rumbling in his chest. "I remember a very bossy woman yelling at me." "I was not bossy," Lily protested. "I was decisive. 'Rip my dress,' she ordered." Coda turned to face her fully, his eyes darkening with the memory of that heat, that danger, and that overwhelming desire. "I was terrified. You know, not of the soldiers, but of touching you. I thought if I put my hands on you, I would burn to ash." "And yet," Lily teased, stepping closer, "you obeyed." "I am a scout," Coda said, sliding his arms around her waist, pulling her flush against him. "I know when to follow a good command." "I seem to recall," Lily murmured, resting her hands on his chest, feeling the steady beat of his heart, "that you lingered, mouth burning against her skin for a heartbeat too long. That was not in the order, Mr. Blackhawk." "That," Coda said, leaning down until his lips hovered just inches from hers, "was insubordination. Do you wish to court-martial me for it?" "No," Lily whispered, closing her eyes as the memory and the reality blurred into one perfect moment. "I think I will give you a commendation." He kissed her then, under the vast, darkening dome of the western sky. It was a kiss that held the taste of red dust, of cool water, and of a freedom that had been fought for with blood and held with love. They stood there for a long time as the stars began to wheel overhead the great Milky Way that Coda's people believed was the path of spirits, and which Lily now knew was the roof of their home. Below them, the river flowed on, indifferent to the names men gave it, carrying life to the desert. The story of the American West is often told in the crack of a Winchester rifle or the ring of a gold coin on a saloon bar. It is a story of conquest, of lines drawn on maps, and of the violent collision of worlds, but in the high desert of Gray Mesa, beneath the shadow of the Devil's Anvil. Another story was written. It was not written in ink or blood, but in the quiet courage of 2 people who refused to accept the world as it was. Coda Blackhawk and Lily Hart did not save the whole world. Prejudice still lived in the dark corners of the territory. Greed still drove the engines of the East, but they had carved out a sanctuary, a small, fragile, beautiful space where a child could speak 2 languages and a river could flow free. They proved that while the West was wild, the human heart was still wilder, unconquerable, untamable, and capable of bridging the deepest canyons. And as they walked back to their horses, hand in hand, leaving the ghosts of the past on the cliff edge, they walked toward a future that was not white or red, but simply, radiantly, free. Thank you so much for listening to the final chapter of Rip My Dress. It has been a journey through the dust and passion of the Wild West, and I hope Coda and Lily's story has touched a chord in your heart. I would love to know where you are listening from today. Are you tuning in from a busy city, a quiet countryside, or somewhere in between? Please leave a comment below sharing your location and your thoughts on the ending. Did Coda and Lily find the peace they deserved? If you enjoyed this story, Please consider subscribing to my channel, Wild West Tales. Hit that like button to support the work and smash the hype button to help this story reach more listeners. Your support keeps the campfire burning and the stories flowing. Until next time, keep your eyes on the horizon.